Good morning. I am absolutely thrilled to be with you today. I have to tell you that for me, this is a particular moment in education. And I've been in this business a long time. Next year, if any of you see me, you'll hear me say that I've been in education for 50 years. So this is 49. 49 doesn't sound like 50, right? It doesn't sound like as impressive, like 50. So I'm waiting to get my 50 out there. And I've had a lot of interest in the work. I would hope that every educator would have the kind of attention that I've received in my lifetime in education. President Obama decided to create Promised Neighborhoods based on our work. Paul Tough wrote the book, Whatever It Takes. Waiting for Superman came out. And there's been like all of these really terrific honors. But I have to tell you the one that I was most excited about. All of them is good, but they didn't really mean that much to me. The thing that really moved me was Fortune magazine listed me as the 12th most influential person in the world some years ago, right? No, but that's not why it was important. No, that wasn't the reason. I got a stack of those magazines, and I took them home to my wife. I've been trying to impress this black woman for 30 years, right? I was like, hon, look. And she's flipping through it, and she comes and she looks. She says to me, so couldn't make the top 10, huh? It's okay, that's all right. I don't mind. But there's a reason I'm here because I retired, right? You have to know when it's time to get out of the education business. You know when that is? When you run into your students and they're bald and gray, right? And they're telling her, oh, you remember me? And I'm like, you're an old man. That's what 50 years in this business will do. So I retired. I had a wonderful CEO came in. Then that CEO, we have our second CEO. And my wife will tell you, so some of you may not get this. My wife will tell you, I woke up in the middle of the night 3 years ago, and God said to me that you've got to save another 1 million kids. Now, I know people say, well, you know, this is not like the burning bush kind of thing, right? But this was serious. And at that point in time, our new CEO, Kwame Owusu-Kessie, he decided that we had to go out and save 1 million kids. Now, this is a little bit of payback. I drafted Kwame from Morgan Stanley. He was an investment banker. Had dual degrees from the Harvard Business School and the Kennedy School. And Kwame will tell everybody, I saved him from a life of privilege and prosperity, right? To come join us in this war that we're in. And he's paid me back because he decided he's going to get me to come out of retirement. So I came out, and I hadn't created the William Julius Wilson Institute but a few months when COVID hit. Now I understand why I had to come back. COVID, what it did to poor children in this country is unprecedented. And during my career in education, I've gone through just lots of crises. Crack epidemic. I was in Boston when they were doing the desegregation back in the 70s. I mean, these were traumatic times. They don't come close to what our children are facing today. This is a real crisis, and it's claiming lives of young people. And you know, sometimes people say things and it's hyperbole. This is not hyperbole. This is literally life or death for young people in this country. I found out about this a long time ago. You know, when Davis Guggenheim was doing Waiting for Superman, he had told me, I'm going to make a film. People are going to care about education. And I told him no. I was like, I've been in this business my whole life. You can't get people to care enough about poor children and their failure. He said, no, Jeff, we're going to do it. And so after the film was done, about 6 months later, it didn't have a name. He called me and he said, oh, we got a name for the film. And I said, well, what is it? He said, Waiting for Superman. And I realized that was a statement I had made during that film. That when I was a kid, I was a big comic book lover. Superman, Superwoman, Batman. Sorry, there was no Marvel. This is way back in the day. And I was talking to my mother about it, and she told me, Jeff, there's no Superman. And I began to cry, and she thought I was crying because there's no Easter Bunny, right? I was crying because if you were growing up in the South Bronx in the 50s, when that community was falling apart, when there was trash everywhere, where there was violence was ever present, where we were living with vermin, roaches, and mice and rats as just a general part of our existence, where we knew as children we were not going to survive getting out of that place because that was no place for a child to grow up. I knew if there were no superheroes, we weren't going to make it. And some of you would say, well, Jeff, you made it, yeah, but there were 4 of us and only 3 of us made it out. And my wife, Yvonne, from Harlem, she had 3 brothers and sisters. None of them made it. When I say this is about life and death, I'm not kidding. And now, it is even tougher on children than it's ever been before. So we need a new paradigm. And I came out of retirement to say, I'm going to start yelling at y'all in a minute, so I'm just bear with me, because I'm just telling you that people aren't taking this thing seriously. And our children will not survive this time unless we do something different when it comes to education. You can't keep doing the same thing that hasn't worked year after year after year and expect a different change. Now, so you say, what's the big challenge? You all know teachers are leaving this field in just historic numbers. Folks don't want to work in education. It was hard enough before to get people to work in education. I found out a long time ago why we struggle so much when it comes to recruiting the top talent, the most sophisticated, intelligent, committed people to come into this field. And I found out when I was an undergraduate student at Bowdoin. Bowdoin's a small liberal arts college up in Maine. When I was there, I always wanted to be a teacher, an educator. That's all I wanted to do with my life. They didn't offer an education program, so I was a sociology, psychology major. And I took every education class there was. So my senior year, I took a pharmacology class because there was a heroin epidemic in the Bronx. It was really in lots of minority communities, but I was living through that. And I wanted to understand why could a drug destroy a whole community, right? And I could just watch it, just devastating. And I was like, there gotta be an answer for this. So I'm studying all about pharmacology. The other class I took was physiology. And I knew there was this connection between the mind and the body, right? That there was things going on physically. If you weren't physically well, that was going to impact your ability to learn. I knew that when I was 18 and 19. So I took these classes. I got an A in both classes. And the head of the biology department came out and he said, Jeff, you took 2 pure science classes and you got A's. Do you know what that means? I said, no, what does it mean? He said, it means you're smart. I said, yeah, I'm smart. He said, no, no, no. It means you're really smart. I hear you want to be a teacher. I said, yeah, I want to be a teacher. He said, no, you don't. You want to be a doctor. I said, no, I don't want to be a doctor. Yes, you do. Let me tell you why. You know how much a teacher makes? And he shook his head. He said, you know how much a doctor makes? He said, you know what it means in your social network when you tell people you're a doctor versus you're a teacher? I still wasn't going for it. He brought the head of the chemistry department. They tag teamed me, both of them. Why are you going to waste your life in education when you could? Finally, I relented. I said, fine, I'm going to be a doctor. And I had to take 6 months worth of science and math classes before I could go to medical school. Full scholarship, tuition, room and board, book money, everything for me to become a doctor. And I had to sign a contract. And right before I signed the contract, I realized, I don't want to be a doctor. I don't like being around sick people. Why would I do that? I want to be a teacher. If you think that that status has changed about how people think about coming into our field, you are mistaken. People think anyone could be a teacher, anyone could be an educator. And you and I know the amount of talent, the amount of tenacity, the amount of determination it takes to do this work is not cut out for anybody but the best in this country. And you know, I've gone a lot of places and they say, oh, Jeff, you could be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And when I'm talking to those CEOs, I often say, yeah, but you could never come work in my school. I mean, you just don't have it. And I mean that. I mean that. So if you are thinking about why is our work so hard, why is it so difficult to be successful in this work, most of it is because we haven't designed our strategies so they will be successful. And here is one of the major challenges that we're facing. It is really, really hard to move the needle in certain places in this country. And the reason is that we have decided the only tool in our toolbox for 100 years of disinvestment, discrimination, abuse is K-12. It's not enough. That's not going to make up for all that has not happened all of those years. You know, recently I joined the board of Memorial Sloan Kettering, the cancer hospital. We think it's the best hospital for cancer in the country. Others would debate that. We're at least in the top 5. And I'm going to make a bold statement right now. Your children will not die from cancer. They will not. They have figured out how to deal with most of the cancers if they get them early, and lots of them if they get them late. But you know what they discovered? Cancer is not one disease. It's not like 5 diseases. People think, oh, prostate, breast cancer, colon. 200 different cancers, at least. So imagine if you think you're dealing with one thing, and the only thing you have is one tool. But that's not the right cancer. You know how complex it is to figure out strategies for 200 different diseases? And you know what? They've done it. They figured it out. They made the investments, they raised the capital, they studied, they admitted when things didn't work. You know what? The medical model is really marvelous, because the only way anything is considered successful is if you publish it, and then if it's peer-reviewed, meaning somebody else says, oh yeah, I know how to get this done. Because that way you don't keep doing things that don't work. Sound familiar about a strategy we should be embracing? Why do we continue to do things that have not worked? Half of it is because we don't realize how complicated this issue is. When you are dealing with children growing up in poverty, it is as complicated as the 200 different forms of cancer. And how many tools do we have? Straight K-12 education. I'm telling you, it has not worked. It will not work until we decide that we're going to do something different. So, what did we do differently? We followed the science. What does the science say? Poor children who are growing up in substandard living and environmental conditions, they are behind literally at birth. And that gap grows every year that they don't have intensive interventions. And so why are we waiting till kindergarten? Why are we waiting to pre-K to begin to engage with our children? And I would love to tell you that, I figured all this stuff out myself, and I was like, okay, I'm going to solve this. Let me tell you the truth about how we created the Harlem Children's Zone. I knew place matters, right? This is before Raj Chetty's work about place and how important it is. A kid growing up literally 6/10 of a mile from one place, you move that kid over, suddenly their life expectancies change because they have been removed from a toxic environment into a more neutral or positive environment. I knew that because I lived it. I had this idea to work in 97 blocks. And this foundation person I knew, head of the foundation, said to me, Jeff, I have this idea that place matters and we need to focus on a place. I said, that's funny. I've been planning on doing that. And then she says, you should give me something. You know what that meant to me? I'm getting a grant. Now I'm thinking, wow, I wonder how much this grant's gonna be. Now, I got to ask for a lot, but not too much, right? Because I'm doing this calculation with the funder. So I think, oh, maybe this is a 7-figure grant. So I wrote a 7-figure proposal. I turned it in. She looked at it and said, really? You're gonna end generational poverty with it? And I thought, no, give me that back. No, no, no. I was like, this sounds like a $5 million grant, right? So I wrote the $5 million proposal. This is true. I wrote the $5 million proposal. I turned it in. She says, okay, that's better, but are you going to guarantee me that you're going to end generational? I said, guarantee? Guarantee? Oh, no, no, no. Give me that back. I said, I think I'm about to hit the mother lode. You know what I did? I wrote the truth. For the first time in my life, I told the truth about what it would really take to save children growing up in poverty. I said, we're going to start at birth. We're going to stay with those same kids through pre-K, through elementary, same kids in middle school, same kids in high school. We're going to then get those kids in college, and we're not going to leave them there. We're going to stay with those kids until they graduate college. And I had no data then. I didn't have the data we have today at the Harlem Children's Zone, where we've got close to 1,000 children in college right now, more than 2,000 kids with college degrees. I didn't have any of that stuff. I just knew if kids are growing up in a place that other people wouldn't be caught dead, that other people would say, don't go there at night, you don't want to walk around that place. Those children don't have a chance unless we design a strategy that is full and comprehensive. And it's not just education. As we cleaned up the streets, we made sure that the housing was decent, that trees and parks were planted and taken care of, and we changed that environment in Harlem. That's what I wrote. That was the $30 million proposal. You know what? Wait, you have to hear the answer to this. So I gave her the proposal. And she said, so this is it? I said, this is it. She says, you guarantee me? I said, I guarantee you this. She said, I just have one question. I said, what's the question? Where are you going to get the money? I said, I thought you were going to give me the money. She said, I don't have that kind of money. This is true. Let me tell you, I decided I would never lie again. I wouldn't turn in another proposal that wasn't going to do the job. Half of the reason our stuff doesn't work is that we haven't really asked for what we need. We are scared to go out and tell somebody what it really costs to save these kids. And I am telling you that if you don't do that investment, you will not save these kids. And part of what we're trying to do at the William Julius Wilson Institute at the Harlem Children's Zone is make sure that we tell the truth about what it takes to save kids in our community. And this is not, look, our children do not need weak advocates. If people are not prepared to stand up and say, this is what we need to get this job done, if we keep taking the dollars that we know won't produce the results, and therefore it causes failure, and then people look at our work and they say, well, yeah, but it really didn't make any difference, then we'll continue to see these children fail. And what's worse now, let me tell you what's worse now. because of COVID, we have record amounts of children who don't even go to school anymore. They don't. Right now, chronic absenteeism has doubled in the United States to more than 28%. That's more than 16 million children who are not going to school every day. And in the big cities, it's often 40% of the kids who are chronically absent. And look, if you're not even in school, how are you going to get an education? And we're not talking about the learning loss that happened. We're not talking about the emotional devastation that's happened to so many of our children. We're not talking about the fact that children in our country are killed at numbers that are unparalleled in any place else in the world, except maybe in war places where there are wars going on. You can't go Super Bowl parties. You can't go to great adventures. You can't go to supermarkets, all mass killings. In schools, our kids are growing up knowing that their lives don't count for much. And I'm going to try and teach a kid calculus who's growing up in a place where the calculus they want to know is, how do I get from my home to my school back safely and alive? I don't care about your calculus, Jeff. It means nothing to me. How are we allowing that to happen in our country? We need a new paradigm. This is a war. I am telling you, this is a war, and I have some bad news for you. There's a draft going on, and I'm drafting people all over this country for this war, and I hope to draft all of you all, because if we don't do something different, let me tell you what we're going to see in 15 years. We're going to be talking about the COVID generation. We're going to be talking, why are so many of these kids unemployable? How come we have so many adults with mental health problems? How come we have so many folks who are doing suicide? They're going to be, oh yeah, that's that COVID generation that we ignored when we knew their lives were becoming unraveled. So yeah, we're looking for a group of folks who are prepared to come shoulder to shoulder with us and tackle this issue of education. Because it's more than just K-12. Look, and I'm going to disappoint some educators now. One of the things we figured out at the Harlem Children's Zone is the physics of education. You know how schools were designed? So that middle-class kids from fairly stable environments would make 1 year's progress in math and 1 year's progress in ELA in between 160 to 180 days of school. That's how the whole thing's designed. That's how much time we figured kids need to be in school. But what happens if you're 2 years behind? If you're 2 years behind and you're in school the same amount of time and you're expected to make 1 year's progress, at the end of that year, you're going to be, okay, wait, maybe that was too hard a math problem. Okay, all right. You ever, I said it, I heard you say, you ever were in school and they were teaching you some math and you said, I'll never use this? If a train left Austin at 9 o'clock in the morning, heading north, going 30 miles an hour, and another train left Austin at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, heading north, going 30 miles an hour, when will train B catch train A? Never. Now, we got kids who are behind. You think you're going to catch them up in the same time frame? Oh, no, you're not. It's never worked anywhere in this country. We'll continue to do it, even though it doesn't work. You've got to have more time on task if you're going to get those kids to be successful. And what does that mean? Well, I'll tell you what it means at the Harlem Children's Zone. We have our superintendent here, sitting right here, Dr. Petit. You can ask him, what does it take to get the poorest kids in Harlem, that we know there's no creaming, we're taking these kids from the poorest section, from the housing projects and everything. What does it take to eliminate the achievement gap between those children of color and white children in the state and in the city of New York? He will tell you, my kids were in school yesterday. Oh, yesterday was Saturday. Oh, yes. My kids will be in school this summer. Oh, yes. Our kids are going to be successful, they're going to be on grade level, and they're going to college. But no school can do that by themselves. Who are you partnering with? Who are your key partners so that you know when my day is over, and I've taught my classes, those same young people are going to continue their educational journey so we can make up that gap. This is something that, folks are going to, I know what folks are going to say, because we hear it. If you think in a shield school that the teachers are all like, yeah, we want to work Saturdays, and yeah, we want to work. No. I wish, if any of y'all know those teachers, could y'all send them to me, please? I'm looking for those folks. It is hard. It is hard. Something has to be so important that people are willing to sacrifice. Now, here's one of the challenges in our business. People are stressed out, overworked, burned out, right? It's tough profession, education. But I'm gonna get in trouble for this. It ain't that tough. Let me tell you why. I decided I was gonna look up. So a tough occupation is one where folks find a job so stressful that they end up deciding, I don't wanna live anymore. So you figure out who kills themselves because of their work. You know who the number one? Doctors. Look it up. Look it up. The stress of that job is so much. You know who's number two? Dentist. Who knew? I'm going to be nicer when I get my teeth cleaned to my dentist. I'm being serious. You know who's number three? Police. Number four? Veterinarians. What? Who? Where are teachers? Nowhere on that list. Our job is hard. But there are people who are in much more stressful positions, and we haven't nearly demanded enough from our profession. Look, I believe in paying people as if they're professionals and treating them as if they're professionals. Because let me give you the bad news. There's no plan B. There's no plan. If you don't figure out a way that you're going to make sure that these young people get a real quality education, and it's going to involve putting in more time, more energy. The same people don't have to do it. Who are your after-school partners? Who are your summer partners? How are you connecting with folks so you can share this load with young people so that they are not, the faculty of our schools are not the only ones who are putting in this hard work? This is the new paradigm we have to do. And by the way, at the Institute, we're going to be partnering. I think we've got 20 different superintendents from some of the top schools in this country because we need our superintendents, we need our educators to be part of this new paradigm for how we're going to make sure young people get the additional services and supports they need. So, I have two challenges for you all that I want you all to take home with you. I'm talking about a revolutionary act, changing the way we think about K-12. We think about these communities. We think about who we partner with, how we organize our time and effort so our children are successful. And it means you're going to have to think outside the box. The first thing, I'm going to tell you this, the first thing that you're going to hear when you go back and say, you know what, I think we need to really rethink sort of the education week, the education year, how we use weekends. How, people are going to tell you, oh, no, can't be done. And they're going to say, here, wherever here is, we're not going to find anybody who's able to do that work. If that was the case, I'd retire again. I know that's not true. We have not designed a system that invites folks in to help us do this work. So whenever I think about thinking outside the box, again, personal life, I'm at Bowdoin. I'm a psych major. Folks say to me, the upperclassmen, I'm a freshman, you're a psych major? I said, yes. They said, well, I don't know if you want to be a psych major. I said, why? They said, because of statistics. I said, what? They said, oh, no. A lot of people change their majors because of statistics. and I really wanted to be a psych major. So I didn't take statistics my freshman year. Sophomore year, you had to declare a major. I took my statistics class. I got my first test back. I can see it till this day. I got a 37. Now, this was a real 37. This thing wasn't marked on a curve, right? I mean, I wasn't close to passing, and I'm thinking, okay, there goes psychology. My career is over. And something said to me, talk to the professor. So I go to the professor, and I say to the professor, look, I studied all week. I was up all night preparing. I need to be a psych major. I don't know what. He said, Jeff, calm down, calm down. He said, I know what happened to you. I said, you do? What happened? He said, it was the slant. I said, what do you mean was the slant? He said, look, all of our textbooks have real authors. These are real people. They have their own biases. It comes up in their writing. This author has a particularly strong bias. It's working for everybody else. It's not working for you. I want you to try a textbook written by an author with an opposite bias. I said, okay. He said, no, a little experiment. He said, tonight, I want you to read tonight's chapter in the old book and see if you get it. I read the chapter, I didn't get it. So I want you to read that same chapter in the new book and see if you get it. I read the chapter in the new book, I got it. I said, look, I understood that. He said, look, we have finals coming up, 3 chapters left. I want you to read them in the old book, see if you understand. I read them, didn't get it. So I want you to read those same chapters in this new book, see if you understand. I read the chapters, I understood, took the test. I got an A on the exam, which means I passed the class. So the next semester, I was sitting in a perception class when it suddenly hit me. I said, that didn't have anything to do with a slant. This guy got me to read 2 books, right? And I was furious with him, right? He took advantage of my sophomoric mind with that whole slant stuff, right? And it wasn't until I was an educator myself that I understood the brilliance of this man. Here he had a kid in front of him who had tried hard but failed miserably. What do? You know what anybody else would have said? Oh, you got to work harder. He knew my ego was so crushed, that my confidence was so shaken, that if I didn't have an alternative way to think about my task, I wouldn't even have worked to be successful. How many times do we run into kids who come in and have failed, and we do not make sure those young people know that that failure is not because they have failed, but because we have failed to give them the kind of support and encouragement that they need to be successful. So I want you to think about thinking outside the box, because if you go back and do what we've been doing, I am going to tell you that this thing is going to go from bad to worse. So here's the other issue I want you all to think about. Our young people in some places, not in all places, are growing up in an environment that is literally hostile to the developmental progress of those young brains. We know what happens when you have toxic stress. It's not just it interferes with your cognitive development. It actually impacts your body. It changes your physical. You are more open to get these chronic illnesses and diseases. Yet, young people are growing up hearing that at any given moment, someone can come into your school and just kill children. This has never happened before. You know, school used to be a safe place, not a place where you have to practice what you're going to do when some strange person comes in and tries to murder everybody. Every school in America has these drills. Now look, in the 50s, we were all worried about nuclear war. We had drills, right? You're all too young to know these drills. You know what they told us to do? Get underneath the table. Now, yeah, I admit I was a 5th grader. I wasn't the best in science. But I said, nuclear holocaust, get under the table. But you know what? We did it because it was a joke. It was funny. We never heard of any place being blown up. All of our kids know that folks come into these schools to kill them. This is now, we accept this in this country. How is that possible? That we accept the fact that our children will grow up knowing strangers will look for them. Where do children congregate? In schools, and come in and kill them. If that wasn't bad enough, I'm going to really get in trouble on this one. You know what this technology is doing to our kids? Addicted. Kids are addicted because the algorithms have figured out how to drive you not to positive things, but to negative things. So you can sit there and watch time after time after time, hour after hour of the most negative images imaginable. And you're 10, and we're okay with this? Well, some kids, it'll be fine. The kids I care about, this is another destructive tool working against us. So when I say this is war, it's not for the faint of heart. The forces are some of the richest, most powerful forces that have ever been created. And they want our kids. They want their attention. They want them to be addicted to these devices. And they are continuing to do everything humanly possible to get them not to listen to you or me, not to care about what we're talking about, but some influencer somewhere selling something that more than likely will lead them towards destruction. That's why this is a war. That's why we got to think differently about the work we're doing. And at our institute, we're working in 20 cities. But when I woke up and said 1 million children, my wife was like, you don't even have a job. How are you going to save 1 million kids? So now I'm back to work. We can't save these kids unless we draft an army of us to come out and decide enough is enough. When's enough in this country? When do we figure out the richest country ever in the history of the world has child poverty rates that are just, it's unimaginable that we're allowing children to grow up in these kind of environments, homelessness, the substance abuse that they're dealing with in their homes and their families, the amount of violence. That's an American problem that we as the citizens of this country and the education leaders that we are, we've allowed that to exist, and we have felt kind of powerless. You know why we're powerless? We don't want to fight. That's why we need an army. We got to have folks who are prepared to fight, because no one's going to change just because it's hurting a bunch of poor children, and maybe their lives are going to be destroyed. Here's the last thing I want you all to know we have to do. Our children have grown up in a world that, for many of them, they see no way they're going to be successful. Like I was when I was growing up in the South Bronx. Part of the issue that we have such high suicide rates going on right now is our children don't have faith that their life is going to be better. And I've been thinking about this issue of faith. And you know, faith is a funny thing. I don't know if you grew up in an institution that talked about faith, but I'm a Christian, Baptist. Every Sunday in church, there would be testimony, right? Somebody would get up and say, the doctor said that I had cancer, I wasn't going to live, but I prayed, and they can't find the cancer anymore, and the church would just celebrate, because that is faith. Faith says when the facts are against you, your belief not to give up, that things will be all right, is what leads people not to give up. And then, faith is a funny thing, because you've got to have it before you need it, right? You can't be going through life, I don't believe, hit one of those rough patches, say, I better get my faith thing together now, right? How many of our children are growing up with any sense of faith at all? Any belief that something is more powerful than the forces arrayed against them, that they shouldn't give up, that they shouldn't decide life is not worth living? How many young people are we losing because they have no faith? And what's our role in that? Whenever I think about this, was one man. He was a football coach in my high school that taught us all about faith. His name was Coach Fusco, and Coach was one of those funny kind of guys that no matter what problem you brought to him, he could find a silver lining in that cloud, right? You'd come in and say, Coach Fusco, my grandmother died. He said, Jeff, that's terrible. But I know your grandfather, how blessed you are to have, right? No matter what, we used to make stuff up just to hear what he would say, right? So my junior year, I was the quarterback of the football team, right? We had a seasoned team, mostly seniors, a couple of juniors, and we were 1 point away from winning our league championship. So the next year, I'm the senior. The school's on austerity, it's a poor school, Long Island. Nobody wants to play football. And we have tryouts, and I'm looking at these kids trying out, and I say to Coach Fusco, Coach, these kids, they're so small. He says, yes, Jeff, but they're fast. And we got a team of fast players, and I created these plays for our kids. I said, okay. 2 weeks later, we had time trials. Coach, they're slow. He said, yes, Jeff, but don't you see the brilliance of this, right? Everybody's going to see how small they are. They're going to think they're fast. They're really slow. And I've got these plays I've created. And so I was like, I was a little dubious, but I was, I'm a senior. This is the team I got. So I used the first game, I used the plays for small kids who were slow. We lost. Coach said, no, Jeff, no, of course you're going to lose. We got to work out the kinks. We lost our second game. We lost our third game. We lost our fourth game. Now, we only had an 8-game season. And I'm saying to the coach, this thing is not working. He said, yes, Jeff, this was always about the second half. I didn't want to tell you the first half, I don't want you to get, but the second half is going to be strong. We lost our fifth game. We lost our sixth game. We lost our seventh game. Now, look, we're 0-7. It's Saturday morning. We're playing the league-leading champions. They are 7-0. I come to the perfectly logical conclusion that this is the appropriate time to quit football. I'm done. I'm at my locker. I'm not getting dressed. Coach Fusco, he walks in, he sees me. He says, Jeff, I don't believe it. You're going to quit? You're going to quit now that we've got them just where we want them? He says, everybody thinks this team is a loser. When you go out and win this game, you're going to shock the town. They're going to be talking about the next 15 years. Why do we never give up? Because Jeff Canada led us to victory when everybody else thought we would fail. Do you think Dr. King would have quit? No, he would have fought. He said, Jeff, get up and fight. I said, Coach, we can win. We can win. We lost. The game is over. I'm looking at Coach Fusco. Coach, what do you have to say now? He looks at me, he says, Jeff, basketball season starts next week. We're going to have a great team, right? I mean, this guy just wouldn't quit, but he got to us. He got to us. We realized there was somebody who believed we were stronger than any other force out there. And that, even to, Fusco has to be 90-something today. He is still doing things to support that high school. Your role in ensuring our young people don't give up is critical. You probably haven't learned anything about it in graduate school or any place else, but it is critical, and you need to recognize how important you are in children's lives. And you've got to be strong and visible and powerful so these young people know there's somebody there who won't ever let them down. Now, I want to close. We're going to take questions, but I want to close with a poem. This particular poem is one that I am using everywhere I go. It is called A Small Army of Love. Heard the news yesterday, and today mothers cried. Our children by tens of thousands have died, and for what? What will stop this madness, the eternal sadness of small little caskets filled with dreams never had? Are we mad? We need a small army of love and no thanks. We don't need any rifles, no guns, and no tanks, just love, and help from above. Our army will be small, diverse, and unique. Little soldiers with braids and some with sneakered feet, all marching for peace and an end to the war that has claimed little soldiers when they open their doors to romp in the playgrounds. Can we stand anymore? We need a small army of love start today. Sentries on guard, keeping danger away. While our young go to school and play on our streets, a small army of us standing guard while they sleep. Can't be done. And the love of our army will always sustain us when others disdain us with laughs, ridicule. Our love keeps us fighting. Yes, we're fighting fools. So I know what's been whispered and what some said aloud. Those fools with their pipe dreams, their heads in the clouds. But when you love all the children, there's nothing to do but start a small army of love, me and you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to invite Christian Rhodes up, who's our deputy at the William Jewis Wilson Institute, and we're going to take some questions.
Sure. So just for the record, my name is Sally Jesse Raphael. This is a lifetime dream, grad school. I just want to ask this question. It's not on there, but Jeff, as I listened to the stanzas, when did you write that poem?
About maybe 10, 12 years ago. I wrote it when we were losing kids at the Harlem Children's Zone to violence at record numbers.
Yeah, some of the stanza it was as if he had wrote it yesterday. That was the tanks and the mothers crying. So we got a lot of questions that have come through. Short amount of time. They're going to do the Sandman and pull us off the stage. So if you see anybody come get us, they'll get me first and Jeff last because he's way more important than me. But I want to ask this question around economic mobility. It's a topic that I know is near and dear to your heart, our CEO, Kwame Usukese at the Harlem Children's Zone. But it's from Olivia, and it says, can you provide some examples of some specific initiatives within place-based work that shows significant impact on economic mobility?
Yeah, the place I would send people to look at is essentially what happened in Harlem. When we started our work more than 20 years ago, about 21 years ago, Harlem was a place that there were no national chains at all. No one came to Harlem to do work. People avoided Harlem. They thought you couldn't do business there. Once we improved safety, improved education, improved how the neighborhood looked, there's not a national chain that you can think of that's not currently in Harlem. And the question is, are we preparing young people so they can take advantages of the jobs and the opportunities that come in the community? To me, the stand-in for economic mobility is whether or not that young person is going to be able to get a job knowing that the days of you having one job and staying in that job forever, those days are long gone. You're going to have to constantly be prepared to learn, to relearn, to sort of enroll in schools and other programs to keep up with the changes in the economy. And to me, shorthand, college degree. I just don't know another way of saying young people are prepared to face this economic challenges I think that our current market environment provides.
Thank you. And we have some people across the country. I get a chance to travel with you. We have some friends here from Dayton, Ohio, some friends here from Wilmington, Delaware, doing amazing work in their respective cities. But I oftentimes hear you talk about some of the, if you would have known now what you known then, some things you would have changed. This specifically gets to the concept of gentrification. Yeah. What are some of the negative or positive, or even more importantly, where are some of the things you wish that you would have known then that you would have been able to kind of guard against?
The biggest mistake I made in creating the Harlem Children's Zone was not taking advantage of purchasing property when no one else wanted it. There was a time, and this happens in lots of poor communities, that literally the mayor, was Giuliani at that time, was trying to give a lot of the property in Harlem away because no one wanted it at all. No one wanted to live there. And I didn't want to get distracted by trying to get involved in bricks and mortar at the same time we were trying to create the zone. But when you look today at how expensive it is to live in Harlem, you realize that even my kids with degrees are going to find it very difficult to afford a place in Harlem now because it has changed. And so what we've said to other places, if you're going to work in one of those communities that no one wants to live in, before you fix it, purchase enough so you'll have at least places for your kids when they graduate from college, they can come and find a way to stay in their own communities. And that is, to me, a huge challenge, because in lots of places in this country, gentrification is moving out the original folks, often black and brown people who have moved here, and they don't have anywhere to go. Right now, when no one wants that property, we need to be developing land trust and other ways of making sure that the residents can enjoy the fruits from that when those property values begin to increase, so that that gets shared with the folks who've been living there for all of their lives.
Right. You know, there's a question that has come up too around how did you convince, you know, local businesses, anchor institutions within the community to join your army of love, especially given in a place like Harlem where there have been a number of efforts starting and stopping, community, you know, trust is questioning whether this is going to happen. Let's just get your perspective on that.
Yeah, so this is, you know, one of the things about a place like Harlem 20 years ago is that lots of folks had come in and promised they were going to make it better. And they failed. And time after time after time, folks said, oh, come join me. We had the Harlem Act, we had the Empowerment Zone, we had different things that folks said, oh yeah, this is gonna make this a better place. So when I came with my big idea, people were like, oh, here you go again. What we did was ask folks to join us, and often they would say, with some skepticism, no. But when they actually began to see us doing the work, this was about rolling up your sleeves and going out there in those neighborhoods, painting those hallways, getting rid of those empty lots, turning them into community gardens, getting rid of the graffiti. Once folks saw real action happening, we suddenly had people who believed again. They thought, this is not just the same old, same old. These people are deeply invested. You know, there's a group of people who talk, and they talk the right game. They got all the right words. That doesn't mean much in communities like Harlem. The question is, are you going to be there in the hood with everybody else doing the work? And that, to me, is the critical piece of this. You're not going to convince folks by coming up with great phrases. You will convince them when they see things changing. We started our work on 119th Street. There was one, Mother Pearl was there. She was a community activist. We changed that block, but people said, yeah, that's because of Mother Pearl. We changed the second block, 120th Street. Yeah, there's another. 121st Street. By the time we went to 122nd Street, people began to say, uh-oh, this thing is real. This thing is happening. And suddenly, they wanted to join. What we found is that hope as well as despair are infectious. And the question is, if you've lived in a community where it's just all negative, who got murdered, who got robbed, whose house got broken into, if that's all you're hearing and not about the good stuff, then that's what people think of their neighborhood. And it spreads around like a virus. If you start doing good stuff, that begins to spread too. And people say, when are you coming to my block, which is what we found.
Sure, just one last question. This one isn't on the screen, so if y'all see me with a resume later, it's because I got fired. But I'm intrigued just to get your perspective. I know our colleague Jasmine Lewis is here, Marlene Fox is here, our colleague Sal's here, Brian on our team. These are Eric on our team. These are people who were young people in your programs and grew up with you and now working. You know, tell me a little bit about what does success look like for you now that you've had a chance to look over 40 plus years of doing this work in Harlem.
So, I mean, you know how proud I am that there are people who were young people in the Harlem Children's Zone who now have senior positions helping to sort of continue this work and actually spread this work around the country. Here's one of the challenges that we face, and I suspect other places face. You want to do something really complicated, and you need to find the talent to do that. When we looked around Harlem 22 years ago for the talent, we couldn't find it. We would look in there, people hadn't gone to college, they hadn't been involved in these kind of programs that develop these skills. So we said, let's train a group of folks. So yes, we brought in folks from the outside for the first 5 years, but the intention was always develop your talent locally, support that talent, and then engage that talent in being part of your efforts to get this job done. And I think this is one of the areas that we have struggled in the most. The institutions that have most of the money often don't come from the communities that they're working in. And if you go in, they say, yeah, but we need a set of skills and we can't find them there. And then my statement back is, what are you doing to ensure that those young people are developing those skills right now so that they can come back and in 5 years, they will be the ones who can then do this work. This idea that outsiders are doing the work is something that has, I think, been an impediment to this work spreading around the country. I think we were always intentional in saying this is about the people who live in Harlem being able to be the leaders of this work, and they are the leaders of the work now in many of our areas of development. So I think for all of us, part of the commitment you're making to this work is how many folks on your team are coming from the communities that you service. How many of them have grown up understanding why this work is so critical? The people you mentioned right now, these are some of the toughest folks to deal with at the organization because they're true believers because they lived it. This is not theoretical to them. And if you're not prepared to be all out, it's tough to work at the Harlem Children's Zone because a bunch of our folks are like, no, we know what it takes because this is what saved me, and this is what, in my opinion, will save America.
Do me a favor and give Mr. Jeffrey Canada a round of applause.